Yeah, thanks for the introduction, Kelly. Like he mentioned, my name is Luke Jorgensen. I'm the intern extension agrologist here in Outlook. I've been with the ministry for about 6 months, and I'm not going to talk about corn at the beginning, following the same trend as Kaylee, but I will get into it. But I wanted to talk about some of the funding that we have available through the Canadian Agricultural Partnership, or CAP. So there's lots of programs through this funding suite, but I'm going to talk about the ones that are most relevant to cattle producers. So the Farm and Ranch Water Infrastructure Program, the Farm Stewardship Program, and the Ag Skills and Knowledge Program, as well as the Beef Assurance Program. And then I'll get into our variety trial that we did here under irrigation. So the Canadian Agricultural Partnership, or CAP, is a 5-year funding agreement between the federal and provincial government. It used to be Growing Forward 2. You guys might have heard of that, and before that it was Growing Forward 1. Because it's a new agreement, all of the funding limits have been reset. It's a blank slate for the new programs under the new agreement. So like I mentioned, the agreement between the feds and the province to invest $388 million into the Saskatchewan industry over the next 5 years, the Saskatchewan agriculture industry. The federal government takes a 60% share of the cost, and the provincial takes 40%. And the ministry does have ag program specialists who are staff that are well trained in all of the programs that we're offering under CAP. So you can always call, there's one at most of your regional offices. You can call your regional office and talk to an ag program specialist about any questions you have regarding these programs. Or the AKC, the Agriculture Knowledge Center, is a toll-free number that's available 8 to 5, Monday to Friday. And if they can't answer your question there, they'll put you in touch with someone who can. So I've got a card like this sitting in the back. It's just an outline of all the programs that are available through CAP. I've started the ones that I'm going to talk about that are focused or applicable to cattle producers. General eligibility requirements for all of the CAP programs are that you are an agricultural producer in Saskatchewan over 18 years of age, and you make at least $50,000 in gross farm income. So some of the programs have additional requirements, it's depending on which one you're looking at, but to access any of the funding you need to be 18 years old in Saskatchewan making $50,000 in gross farm income. And if you are a livestock producer, you need to have a premise identification number. I hope that everyone here with cows has one, but if you don't, it's 10 minutes on our website or a 10-minute phone call at the AKC that I mentioned. If you have one or you think you might have one but you're not sure, you can just give the AKC a call and they can find it for you. It's not too onerous of a process. So the Farm and Ranch Water Infrastructure Program is one of our most popular programs. It was offered through Growing Forward 2. But again, if you utilize that, your funding limit has been reset under the new agreement. We have contracted watershed technicians through the Watershed Stewardship Associations to assist with the delivery of the Farm and Ranch Water Infrastructure Program, FIRWIP, and the Farm Stewardship Program, those two programs. They can help with your application and support you there. I've got this map with your RMs and the contacts for your local watershed technicians in the back as well, so they can help with your application. So under FIRWIP, there's 2 streams of funding. There's the rebate stream and the pre-approval stream. The rebate stream covers dugouts, pipelines, and wells. Right, so it supports at 50% of your cost the development of sustainable water sources for agricultural use. Again, the same eligibility requirements that I discussed earlier. The water needs to be used primarily for agricultural use. We're not going to help you put a pipeline into your house. And you need to have all the necessary permits and approvals before you begin the project. Right? Because it's a rebate, we pay you after it's done. You need to make sure you have all your ducks in a row before you get started, right? Because if it wasn't a legal project, we're not going to support that with funding. And This program is up to $50,000, so you can spend up to $100,000 in the program and get your 50% rebate. So dugouts. We help fund new dugouts, dugout expansions. You need to increase the volume of your dugout by at least 30%. We're not funding cleanouts. Test holes, engineering and consulting, and intake wells put in with the dugout project. They need to be upstream from your corrals, right, to prevent runoff. And we don't cover landscaping or leveling your spoil piles or pumping water. For the pipelines, same thing, agricultural use for the water. We fund deep and shallow buried pipelines as well as directional drilling. So if you need to get under a municipal roadway or something, we can help with that. As well as the engineering and consulting, right? So the construction and excavation as well. And then wells, again, engineering, consulting, test holes, and construction itself. Large diameter wells, small diameter wells, if they're being used for agricultural purposes, they're generally appropriate. Wells have to be at least 30 meters away from your corrals, again, to protect the water quality. So with these projects, there's some components that we do fund and some that we don't. So we do cover tanks or permanent fencing around a well, miscellaneous plumbing, hydrants, off-source watering points, etc. We don't cover anything you can move. So temporary fencing or a gas water pump. No, nothing to do with SaskPower, nothing electrical, wiring, breaker boxes, or any water quality improvement technology, aeration, or anything like that we don't cover. And all of this information and more is available on our website, as well as some specific funding that we won't cover too much for a solar panel. And like I said, the approvals you needed to get before you construct, or else the money is not accessible to you. So it depends on what you're doing and where you're doing it. Like I mentioned, you can work with the watershed technician, or you can call me or one of the agricultural program specialists to make sure you have all your ducks in a row before you do it. Authorization to construct depends on where you are. The premise ID, if you have livestock, water rights license, aquatic habitat protection permit. A lot of times you don't need all of these things, but just make sure you've looked into them beforehand. And so that was the rebate stream, right up to $50,000 at a 50% rebate for your expenses. The pre-approval stream covers well decommissioning at 90% of your cost, but you need to run this by your watershed technician beforehand. It has to comply with Water Security Agency's guidelines, but we'll cover 90% of the cost of decommissioning the well up to $10,000. And then special projects, generally for RMs or community associations, we cover 50% of the cost up to $150,000. It's a pre-approval as well. An example of this would be a RM water tank with a loading facility. On to the farm stewardship program. There's 10 BMPs, beneficial management practices, that we fund through this program. I'm just going to talk about 4 of them that are most relevant to you. The permanent tame and permanent native forage programs, and the grazing management programs. So the permanent tame forage is a fairly popular program. If you have marginal cropland that's erodible or saline, we'll fund 50% of your costs to establish permanent tame forage on that land. Your seed blend needs to be approved by an agri-environmental specialist, and you need to have a watershed technician come to your farm and check out your soils to make sure you're qualified for the program. So again, contact them. but 50% of your establishment costs of permanent tame forage, up to $10,000 under this program. And then the permanent native forage is similar. It's up to $10,000, but it's 90%. We'll cover up to 90% of your establishment costs because we understand that native forage is a lot more expensive.
How long does it have to stay in the ground for? Can you bring it up after 5 years, 10 years, or?
So there's not a particular, that's not addressed, right? We want you to keep it permanent,
Okay.
but 5 years from now we're not going to come check it. And it has to be previously cropped, an annual cropland.
Okay.
And then the grazing management BMPs. Is there another question?
No.
Okay. We call them the fencing BMPs. So if you have native rangeland or riparian areas that you're grazing, we'll support the construction of fences to manage them more effectively. You need to have a range health assessment and a grazing management plan beforehand, right? It's a pre-approval, so you need those before you build the fences. Yes?
I called about all this, so you gotta wait till summer, right? You gotta come out and look at it or what?
Yeah, it's hard to do a range health assessment when there's too much snow on the ground. Yeah. But the watershed technician will come to your property and help you with that in the growing season or fall even. And that's to help manage native rangeland or riparian areas. You might have to put in wildlife-friendly fences, depending on where you are.
So there's no, it doesn't, it can be barbed wire, it can be whatever.
Well, there's some restrictions on what wildlife-friendly fencing entails, depending on your location and what wildlife they're worried about. Right? Sometimes they want a smooth wire on top or a smooth wire on bottom, depending if it's whitetail or antelope that are in the area. But they'll work through that with you when you're doing the application. And that's the Farm Stewardship Program. So the FRWIP and Farm Stewardship Program, again, the watershed technicians can help support your applications there. The Ag Skills and Knowledge Program, I'll just briefly mention it. There's a list of approved farm management courses on our website that are funded through this program. So if there's a course on our website under the Ag Skills and Knowledge Program, you can find the list. It's like 6 pages. Anytime if you take that course, you can get a 50% rebate on the tuition. Right? So if it was $1,000, you take the course, you submit your application and the receipt or confirmation that you took it, you'll get half of that back. Up to $10,000 over the 5-year program, or $2,500 a year. So you can always check that out if you're looking at taking some marketing classes or Ag Expert, or there's some holistic management courses on there as well. It's called the Agriculture Skills and Knowledge Program. Last but not least, the assurance system. So this program exists for different sectors within the agriculture industry. I'm just going to focus on beef. There's $15,000 or up to $15,000 available as a 50% rebate for to support improving your biosecurity and welfare, animal welfare practices. So we can help you purchase or offset the cost of purchasing handling facilities or equipment, or facilities, equipment, or training to improve the biosecurity on your operations. This program is changing as of April 1st, so I'm giving you the updated version. Beforehand, you could access the full $15,000 through just the training stream, but they've split that now. So is anyone partway through the process of applying for this program? Okay. Well, I'll explain it here, and then I can talk to you after if you've got questions, or now. But as of April 1st, there are 2 funding streams: the training stream and the certification stream, right? And this money is to help offset the cost of purchasing equipment or training, and I'll get into the list in a minute. But to access this funding, the first step is to take the industry training. right? So for beef, it's called Verified Beef Production Plus. I don't know if many of you have taken this training, but it's about 3 hours. It's an online course. It costs $50. And you go to verifiedbeefproductionplus.ca and you can take the training there. That's the first step, no matter which stream you're going for. And then to access the first $2,500, the next step is to get a veterinary assessment. So veterinarians have access to a assessment form that includes all the different components that we can fund through this program. And they'll work with you, they'll come out to your farm and work with you to determine which components or equipment would work best or would suit your operation. And they check it off and they sign it, and that's the next step. And then from there you can go ahead and purchase the equipment or components that they've recommended. Right? And then you submit the veterinary assessment, the receipts for your equipment, and your application form. I do have application forms in the back. To Regina, and you'll get a check for 50% of your costs, up to $2,500 if you go through that stream. To access the rest, or the other $12,500, this is what's new, you need to become Verified Beef Production Plus certified. Right? So you take the training, but then you need to get audited. Right? So when you take the training, they'll walk you through what an audit would look like and the kind of practices and procedures, management practices that you'll need to implement to pass the audit. And a lot of guys are already doing a lot of the things that they're recommending there. So sometimes it's easier than you'd expect. One thing that sometimes catches people is you need to have 6 months of records before you can pass an audit. But you take the training, you get certified. The cost of the audit and the veterinary assessment are covered at 50% through this program. So you can get half of that back. And then the steps are the same as before. You get your veterinary assessment, you purchase your equipment as recommended by your veterinarian, and submit your application. So $15,000 available, $2,500 without getting audited, and the other $12,500 if you do go through with the auditing, the certification process. And then, again, I have this list in the back, but some of the things that we can fund are animal or targeted animal welfare improvements, bud boxes, squeeze chutes, remote surveillance cameras for calving is something that's been fairly popular. Like people can put up the cameras where the cows are going to calve and then check their phone and see what's going on, right? Matting for your loading facilities, scales, livestock scales, and feed scales. And then some biosecurity improvements like segregation pens, dead stock sites, or cleaning and disinfection stations. All covered up to 50%. There are some funding limits on particular components, and those are addressed or indicated in the new application form or the new veterinary assessment form. So again, first thing is to take the training, the Verified Beef Production Plus training. And then you get your veterinary assessment and you have access to the $2,500 in rebate for purchasing any of the equipment I just mentioned. To access the other $12,500, you need to get audited, right? And you'll learn about that when you take the training. That's the Verified Beef Production Plus. And you purchase the equipment after the veterinary assessment. And always check our website for up-to-date information, right? These changes are new, and it's always good to make sure that things are the way you think they are. And a final note, equipment that's used or leased isn't eligible. It can't be manufactured by you at home. It needs to be purchased from a recognized distributor or manufacturer. And any labor that you or your employees put into the installation is not eligible for refund. And the vet assessment, which is covered at 50%, does not take up any of the $15,000 cap for the program. Any questions there? I'll be around afterwards too. All right, and with any of our programs, you can go to saskatchewan.ca/CAP, and there's going to be up-to-date information on all of the programs that we're offering, and some fine details. That's programs. Corn. So we did a corn variety trial here. I think we've done it for a few years. I've just had access to the 2017 and 2018 data. It's a variety trial under irrigation at a CSIDC research plot, so just near town here. Funded by another CAP program, the Agricultural Demonstration of Practices and Technologies, or ADOPT. So it's a demonstration, not a core research project. And in 2018, we collected data. We sent the samples into the lab to be analyzed for nutritional analysis. So get some information on feed value. So, like I mentioned, they were the plots were just near town here. It was a Bradwell loam or silty loam soil, seeded at targeted 32,000 plants per acre, like is recommended. And we put 200 pounds of nitrogen on before seeding and 40 pounds at seeding, some was side banded, and 20 pounds of phosphorus. Again, it's irrigated, so you fertilize a lot more expected yield. And the seed was generously supplied by the seed companies and continues to be for the upcoming year. Next year, we're actually having a dry land and irrigated plots, so there should be some information that applies to more people. In 2017, I just wanted to throw the results up here. Some of these aren't available anymore. Some of these were carried over to the next year, so I can show you some comparison. Generally, the Cal 2755, 3007, and the Fusion were carried over to 2018, and the Baxis we used as a check, just a reference variety to use as a reference when we're looking at the data from year to year. There were a lot more heat units in 2017 than in 2018, and you're going to see the differences when I get in, when I compare them here. So yeah, this is the 2017 and 2018 results for those varieties which were planted in both years. So this was our check variety. Fusion did fairly well both years, but just generally across the board, there was a lot less yield in 2018. There was less heat units as well. 2018, we had 16 varieties. Like I mentioned, generally lower yields than 2017. There was 2,204 corn heat units from planting to the first killing frost in 2018. So that's kind of what we're working with for these results. The corn heat unit rating from the varieties we looked at ranged from 1950 to 2675. So a pretty big range there in corn heat unit ratings. And then, like I mentioned, we sent these to the lab and analyzed them for feed value. I have all this data available I can share with you. These also go into the crop varieties for irrigation publication, published by ICDC. I think there's a few copies in the back as well. But if you want the year-to-year data, you can talk to me after, shoot me an email or something. We looked at calcium, phosphorus, crude protein, and TDN, total digestible nutrients. That it indicates kind of the digestibility of the feed and the nutritional value in general. So this chart has, in the blue is the crude protein in percent, and the red line is the yield in tons per acre. And I've arranged them from the lowest heat unit recommendations or requirements to the highest. Right, so this had 2650 and this had 1950. And then the crude protein ranges from 60 to 72%, and that lines up with the blue bars, and then the dry yield ranged from about 4 tons per acre to a bit better than 6 metric tons of dry yield. So wet yield in US tons, I think some of these would be up around 23 tons an acre. The Pioneer 7527 did really well, as well as Fusion. But again, this is 1 year's data at one location. I don't know how much you can take from it, but this is what we saw insofar as yield and percent protein. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the relationship between the corn heat yield requirements and protein yield and TDN. Generally, the varieties with a lower CHU rating had more yield, higher crude protein, kind of, wasn't very consistent, and higher TDN. So that's just something to keep in mind when you're looking at your CHU rating of the varieties you're planting. Again, this was 1 year, and we had significantly less CHUs than expected.
Luke, when you took your yield, did you take like 4 clips in average or what?
Travis? I wasn't here.
They harvested with the forage harvester that will basically sample and then they dry it.
Oh, okay. So you take the
They harvested the whole
one block.
Yeah, the whole lot.
How big were the plots? Like an acre?
No, small plots. Yeah.
What was your row spacing and what did you plant for?
30 inches. They had was it a corn planter?
No.
It was a modified drill, I think.
Seed drill that we plug around so it matches up.
Yeah. Yeah, you planted them, didn't you? Yeah. But that's just what we saw with the data that we got, and none of this is statistically sound. So I just put it into nutrients essentially per acre to give you a kind of different idea of what kind of value you're getting in feed. So the blue is crude protein, red is TDN, and then the yield is on top. And this just really shows that the ones that yielded better had more crude protein per acre and TDN per acre than others, right? It's highly dependent on the yield. But if I take yield out of it, you can see, and again, these are all arranged in lowest to highest CHU ratings. Again, this is the same thing without showing yield. The TDN is represented by the red line on the right and crude protein by the blue bar on the left. Generally, the ones with lower CHU requirements ratings did better. Pioneer 7527 again did really well, and Fusion. That's it. Questions?
These were all irrigation?
Yes, they're all irrigated.
How much water would you put on?
140 millimeters in 2018, and 140 millimeters in 2018. And there was 110, I think, millimeters of rainfall.
Is that a standard that's used in the area? I know when I look at data out of Alberta, they talk about 500 millimeters.
Well, I'm going to refer to the irrigation agrologist.
Yeah, for the climatic data that we get from the weather station, we say that corn can use up to 340 mils, which is about 13.5 inches. So that's we use a coefficient, and then we use our climatic information that we collect at CSADC, and that's what we come up with for corn.
Are those higher heat unit varieties, John, from Alberta too? Or that's why the
can be, but often they're 24, 2,500.
Well, thanks, Luke.